So I want you to think of the most stubborn, set-in-their-ways person you know. You know the exact type I mean.
Oh, yeah. We all know one.
Right. The person who has worn, like, the exact same style of clothes for 20 years, tells the exact same stories at every dinner party, and holds the exact same rigid opinions.
And they usually wear that unchangeable nature like a badge of honor, honestly.
Exactly. And we look at people like that, and we tend to assume, that they've figured it out, like they have this completely solidified identity. But according to the research we were diving into today, that permanent personality, it's actually just a biological and cultural illusion.
Which is, that is a profoundly unsettling realization for a lot of people. Because the belief in a permanent self, it's one of the most deeply ingrained psychological safety blankets we possess as humans. We desperately want to believe that while the world around us might be chaotic, the core us is an anchor.
Well, right. Like we are the one constant.
Exactly.
If it is that fragile, do we even need one at all?
It is a brilliant framework.
Because the primary argument, jumping out of the rogue culture material, is this concept of extreme fragility. They ask, how easily can identity change? And to really visualize this, I was trying to map out how we normally conceptualize our identities.
What did you come up with?
Well, I think most of us treat it like a carved stone monument. You chisel your beliefs, your career, your political affiliations, your personality traits. You chisel all of it into this massive block of marble.
Right, and you set it right in the town square of your mind?
Exactly. And the goal is for it to weather the storm. A strong person has a strong monument. But the source material completely rejects that monument theory. Instead, it views identity more like a reflection in a pond.
Oh, that's a great way to put it.
Yeah, because a reflection is easily scattered by, like, a single pebble of new experience. You drop one pebble in, and the whole image distorts. Which brings me to a direct question. If identity is so easily altered by a new job, a new city, or a new era, is it actually a real thing, or just a temporary illusion we project?
What's fascinating here is why this fragility actually matters. Because recognizing this fragility isn't a reason to panic.
Even though it feels like one.
Oh, it definitely feels like one. But it's actually an essential realization for navigating an age of change. It forces us to accept that being human means being in a constant state of flux. If you cling to the monument idea, you're in trouble.
Right, because a stone monument is utterly incapable of adaptation.
Exactly. If you look at the cognitive science underlying how human beings actually function, a stone monument is the last thing you want to be. The monument cannot dodge a wrecking ball. When the environment shifts dramatically, rigid structures don't adapt. They shatter.
I want to push on that, though. What actually shatters it? Because we talk about identity changing, but what is the mechanism there?
It comes down to how the brain processes reality.
Okay, so if I move to a new city, or if I suddenly lose a job that I've held for a decade, what is physically or psychologically happening to the me that I thought was carved in stone?
Well, our brains are essentially prediction machines. They're constantly generating internal models of the world to help us survive, and your identity, your sense of self, is just another one of those internal models.
Wait, really? It's just a model?
Yeah. So when you are, say, an executive at a company for 10 years, your brain builds a highly specialized predictive model for that exact environment.
It knows the rules of the game. It knows the status hierarchy.
Precisely. Let's say you undergo a massive cultural displacement.
Like moving to a totally different country.
Right. You move from a hyper-corporate Western city to a completely different cultural landscape. Suddenly, your environment has changed radically. The data your brain is taking in no longer matches the predictive model it built.
So the environment stops confirming the story you've been telling yourself.
It creates a massive prediction error. The brain sends up a red flag saying, hey, the algorithm we are using to navigate society is no longer working. We are getting error messages.
Oh.
So that psychological friction you feel, that deep existential panic of an identity crisis, isn't a moral failing. It isn't a sign that you are weak or that you've lost your soul. It is literally your cognitive software crashing because the operating system is incompatible with the new hardware of your reality.
That is incredibly reframing. We treat identity crises like these deeply shameful, tragic events where we've, lost our way. But what you're saying, and what the source is arguing, is that the fragility of identity is actually a necessary feature.
It is the main feature. If your identity wasn't fragile, if it couldn't be broken down by new data, you would never survive a changing environment. Think about the biological equivalent, your immune system.
Oh, I like where this is going.
A healthy immune system isn't a static, unchangeable fortress. It is a highly dynamic, constantly mutating system. It has to encounter new pathogens, break down its old assumptions, and generate entirely new antibodies to survive.
Right. It has to adapt to whatever's attacking it today.
Exactly. So if an immune system stays completely rigid and refuses to adapt to the new environment, what happens?
It attacks itself. You get an autoimmune disease.
Bingo. A rigid identity in a changing world is the psychological equivalent of an autoimmune disease. The rogue culture mindset demands that you recognize this fragility not as weakness, but as your primary survival mechanism.
You are supposed to mutate.
Yes, you're supposed to adapt.
This brings us to part 2 of the sources. Who needs identity anyway? If I accept that my identity is just a biological algorithm constantly updating priors, if it's entirely dependent on whatever environment I happen to be in today, why on earth should I care about it? If it's just a pawn reflection that's going to shift tomorrow, why should I bother defining it today?
The natural slide into nihilism, the crisis of utility.
Yes, because let's be honest, we spend immense amounts of energy curating our identities. We buy specific brands, we curate our social media feeds, we agonize over our career titles, we argue about our political labels. It is exhausting.
It takes a lot of work.
So much work. So if my identity is obsolete the minute my environment changes, why am I killing myself trying to build a personal brand or figure out who I am? Shouldn't we just completely abandon the concept of a core self entirely and save ourselves the stress of an identity crisis? Why shouldn't I just become a complete chameleon?
It is the most seductive trap in philosophy, the siren song of total detachment. Because you figure, if I am nobody, I can be anybody and nothing can ever hurt me.
Right. If there is no stone monument to defend, there is no crisis when it falls over.
Exactly. And the source material intentionally leads us into this exact paradox because it's the only way to reach genuine insight.
So why is the chameleon approach wrong? Because honestly, floating through life without the burden of an identity sounds pretty relaxing compared to constantly defending one.
Just because something is fragile, and just because it is destined to change, does not mean it lacks purpose in the present moment. In fact, if we look closely at how the world works, fragility is often the exact metric that dictates value.
I see the logic, but give me a tangible example. Because my instinct is still that fragile equals unreliable, and unreliable equals useless.
Okay, let's step away from the abstract. Think about something like a glass cup. It's incredibly fragile. If you drop it, it shatters instantly. But you don't say, well, it's going to break eventually, so I'm never going to drink water out of it.
That's true.
Or, to take it a step further, think about human life itself. Biologically speaking, human life is absurdly fragile. A few minutes without oxygen, a sudden drop in core body temperature, a microscopic virus, and it is entirely over.
Yeah, it's terrifyingly delicate when you put it like that.
It is temporary, and it is easily destroyed by environmental shifts. But you would never argue that because human life is fragile, it therefore doesn't matter. You wouldn't say, well, we're all going to die eventually, so let's just stop eating and walk into traffic.
Right, the fragility is actually what commands our respect. Because it can be lost, we go out of our way to protect and nurture it.
Exactly. The fragility of your life is why it holds inherent value. The fragility of your identity operates on the same principle. The fact that it is a temporary projection doesn't mean it's useless. It means it requires care, attention, and active participation.
I really like that framing.
If your identity truly were a stone monument, you could just carve it at age 18, plop it in the town square, and walk away. You would never have to engage with who you are again.
Which is how a lot of people actually try to live, to their own detriment.
Oh, absolutely. Identity isn't a monument you build once. It is an interface. It is the necessary software you use to interact with other human beings, form relationships, make ethical choices, and contribute to society today. You cannot engage with the world without an interface, even if you know you'll need to upgrade that interface next year.
Okay, that interface analogy really clicks for me. It resolves the paradox. I don't have to pretend the interface is permanent, but I also can't just throw my computer in the trash because a software update is coming tomorrow. I still have to send emails today.
And that tension brings us directly into the final and most crucial layer of the sources, the synthesis.
The synthesis being that identity is neither fixed nor meaningless.
Yes, it is an ongoing process of creation.
I was trying to come up with a way to ground this synthesis, and I keep coming back to a new analogy. I think this middle ground view of identity is a lot like the weather.
Oh, the weather. I like that. Walk me through it.
Well, think about how the weather works. It is never, ever fixed. It changes daily, sometimes hourly, based on a million different shifting atmospheric pressures. It is entirely fluid and fragile.
Right. You can't carve a thunderstorm in stone.
Exactly. But you would never say the weather is meaningless.
Oh, of course not.
Because it dictates how we live, how we dress, and how we survive every single day. You don't refuse to put on a winter coat today just because you know it's going to be summer in 6 months.
That is a phenomenal conceptualization.
Right. You respect the temporary reality of the weather in the present moment, even while acknowledging it will inevitably change. Identity feels the exact same way to me.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, that is the core lesson of the Rogue Culture series. Thriving in an age of change requires you to hold two entirely contradictory thoughts in your mind at the exact same time without your brain short-circuiting.
Which is no small feat. We are notoriously bad at holding contradictory thoughts. We want things to be, black or white.
We crave binary categories, yes, but to thrive, you must first completely abandon the rigid idea of a permanent, unchangeable self. You have to let go of the monument. But simultaneously, you must do that without falling into the trap of nihilism. You must care deeply about the identity you inhabit today, while fully accepting you might not inhabit it tomorrow.
When you view identity as the weather you are currently experiencing, rather than a monument you are passively defending, the fact that it changes isn't a threat.
No, it is evidence that you are paying attention. When the culture shifts, your internal climate adapts. When your personal environment changes, your identity updates to maintain communication with reality.
This shifts the entire cultural paradigm we've been fed, because we are constantly sold this romanticized idea of finding yourself. You hear it everywhere. I'm going to take a gap year and travel the world to find myself.
As if the self is a buried treasure chest hidden under the sand.
Exactly. The implication is that there is a hidden, fixed, true you, and if you just dig in the right spot, you'll unearth it, dust it off, and never have to do an ounce of self-reflection ever again. You're just done. But the synthesis we are arriving at here completely detonates the finding yourself myth.
It has to detonate it because the treasure chest doesn't exist.
Yeah.
There is no hidden, fixed you waiting to be discovered. There is only the you that you are actively synthesizing in this current moment, based on your current environment, your current relationships, and the current demands being placed upon you.
It's an active verb, not a noun.
Yes. The Rogue Culture approach is about shifting your goal from finding yourself to creating yourself over and over again.
And realizing that doing so is actually a superpower. Because if you believe your identity is fixed, you become incredibly defensive when the world challenges it. Every shift in culture, every change in your personal circumstances feels like a lethal attack on your core being.
You shatter like the glass cup.
Right. But if you hold that synthesis, if you treat identity like the weather, you just pivot. You say, okay, the climate of my life has changed. I am no longer in that career. I am no longer in that relationship. I am now a person figuring out the next iteration. The context shifts, but your agency remains intact.
You adapt instead of breaking. And I think it's vital to point out that living this way requires a profound amount of self-compassion.
How so?
Because when you realize that your identity is a continuous process of creation and adaptation, you have to look back at the past versions of yourself. The versions that made mistakes, or held beliefs you no longer agree with, or valued things you no longer care about, and you have to forgive them.
Oh, wow. That is heavy. And so true. We spend so much time cringing at who we used to be. Or worse, we feel guilty for changing. Like we are somehow betraying our past selves.
Condemning your past self for not having today's data is like getting angry at a map from 1990 for not showing a road that was built in 2010.
It's completely illogical, yet we do it to ourselves constantly. That is a massive takeaway for anyone listening. Let's trace the arc of what we've unpacked today, because we have covered some incredibly dense psychological and philosophical territory.
You really have.
We started off by taking a hammer to the idea of the permanent self. We explored the sheer fragility of identity through the lens of the rogue culture themes and rogues in paradise, seeing how our brains act as prediction machines that must override our sense of self the moment our environment changes. That was the whole reflection in the pond idea.
And then we waded into the paradox of utility. We confronted that cynical urge to just abandon identity altogether since it's so impermanent. But we discovered that fragility doesn't equal meaninglessness.
Right, the glass cup.
Exactly. Just like a glass cup or human life itself, the fact that identity is temporary is exactly what demands our active care, our respect, and our conscious participation.
And finally, we arrived at the synthesis, the empowering realization that identity is neither a fixed stone monument nor a meaningless illusion. It is a dynamic, ongoing process. It is the weather we navigate in an ever-changing world. But before we wrap up this deep dive, I want to leave you with one final lingering thought to ponder on your own time. Something that really tests the limits of everything we've just discussed today.
Oh, I like a good closing question.
We spent this whole conversation proving that your identity is a temporary, shifting projection. The person you are today is not the person you will be 10 years from now. But if that is true, if your core self is destined to mutate and adapt when you make a lifelong promise or a permanent commitment to someone today, are you actually making it on behalf of the stranger you will become tomorrow?
And be sure to register for the book launch at sample.roguesinparadise.com.